Now, the build-up to Australia Day, as we know, has been filled with controversy, from councils cancelling citizenship ceremonies, 80 councils around the country, supermarkets like Woolies refusing to stock Australiana products, cricketers jumping on the woke change the date bandwagon. Although late today, Cricket Australia has had a backflip, made some sort of a concession to ignoring the day at the Test match at the Gabba. But among all this, thousands of Aussies are still out there celebrating, proud of our beautiful country. And I would imagine, my next guest is no doubt one of them. Joining me is former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman. Great to see you again. I'm no quitter, Campbell, and I know you're not either, but this is just so frustrating. Every year this goes on. I just feel like giving up and saying, get rid of the day. I mean, goodness me.
Well, you sort of started with that, Steve, but then in your editorial, you sound like you weren't for quitting at all, mate. And I don't think we should, because I would say this to people who love Australia, who celebrate this day, as my wife and I were a few hours ago with people in a park in the inner north of Brisbane. It's always darkest before dawn. We now know that 60% of Australians rejected a constitution that divided us on race. And there was a poll around in the last week claiming 68%, I think, of Australians wanted the day to stay the same. If these activists want to keep carrying on, that's their right. But I think Australians, are very clear about what they want. And by the way, the Prime Minister, if he wants to hold a referendum at some stage, try this one on the date of Australia Day. Maybe that'll shut him up.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be game to do that, because he knows the 60% who voted no in the Voice are going to exactly vote no about the day. Yes, you're right. I'm riding both sides of the street, but God, it gets frustrating. I mean, you're in beautiful Queensland. I'm in Melbourne, and Melbourne's the most left-wing capital city in the country, and the whole city was jam-packed with tens of thousands of people. And for some reason, Free Palestine movement has managed to get itself involved in Australia Day protests about Indigenous Australians. So what's that about?
Well, that's totally perverse. I mean, the idea that Aboriginal people and their sort of cause is being linked to that is quite distasteful. And there's been a number of prominent right-thinking Aboriginal people who've made that point. It is a really slippery slope, and I don't think they then do themselves any favours because they're aligning themselves with people who've been protesting, essentially backing Hamas. That's what's been going on clearly in Melbourne and Sydney. That's what we've seen quite clearly. And I wouldn't want, if I was an Aboriginal person, to be sort of locked in with those people. It's just ridiculous.
Campbell, do we need more leadership on this? Do we need a Prime Minister or a Premier or somebody senior in politics to come out and tell us what they think here?
Well, we do, and we saw some leadership, albeit belatedly, from David Crisafulli in Queensland, who said that if he becomes the Premier, he will scotch this truth-telling and treaty stuff, which sadly he voted with his colleagues on some months ago, but at least he finally seen the light. We've seen the New South Wales Labor Premier this week actually say that Australia Day should be on that day, if I've got that correct. I mean, by the way, Minns continues to positively surprise me in some of his moves. He gets it. And then we have the Prime Minister today, though, waffling on about trying to bring us together. And, he's done some very divisive things. I mean, the referendum was one. And another one, contrary to all the spin, is what he's doing on this stage 3 tax cuts, and by breaking his commitment there. That is very divisive, because it is pitting, the less well-off and Middle Australia against the supposed rich. Middle Australia and the less well-paid received their tax cuts some years ago. Other people were promised a tax cut by Scott Morrison and promised a tax cut by Anthony Albanese and Jim Chalmers, and now they've reneged on it. And that's the simple, brutal truth.
Well, I think the word reneged's a bit tame. I mean, they lied. I mean, you've been at the top of politics. Can you survive lying like Anthony Albanese and Jim Chalmers did about those stage 3 tax cuts hundreds of times. And the key to this is during an election campaign. So they were convincing people to vote for them on the promise that you'd get your tax cut. And once elected, it gets chucked out the window. How does any politician survive that?
Oh, I don't think they will get away with it. I think they're thinking that the politics is marvellous for them. I think they think it's finely calibrated so that every child wins a prize. But I don't think they get away from the simple fact that they have lied about it, and that they will be reminded, the community will be reminded about that by the coalition on and on and on. And, it was interesting before just seeing Albo use some words on an issue that was exactly the same as the words he's been using for the last 2 years, essentially, which is, I've got no plans. I've got no, my position is that I've got no plans. Well, what about negative gearing now? Will they break their word on that? Capital gains tax, 50% discount on assets that have been held for over 12 months. What about the capital gains tax exemption on the family home? These are all things that he and Chalmers committed to, and frankly, we cannot believe any of that now. That is what will come back to haunt them. So I think they think they've been smart. I think it's going to burn them in the long run.
So he let you down? Has he disappointed you, Anthony Albanese? I've watched his political career for years. I got to know him reasonably well when I was in Sydney. I thought when he won the election that he would do a much better job, but he seems to have shrunk into the job.
Yeah, and look, let me say this, that when I was the Lord Mayor of Brisbane, this is going back about... it's certainly 14, 15 years ago, he was extremely helpful to me. And there is a tunnel in this city called the Legacy Way Tunnel, which he was instrumental in getting across the line with a commitment of $500 million. I had a lot to do with him in those days. And you know what? I thought he was a great bloke. I thought he was someone who wanted to get things done. And I was very alarmed at one stage subsequent to that when he said the famous line, or the infamous line about, I just want to fight Tories. And I was very disappointed about that. My wife, by the way, was incandescent and never lets me forget it. But, at that moment, I saw a different side of him. And since he's been the PM, he has disappointed. And, today again saying, I want to bring people together, but he doesn't. He keeps setting us against each other, whether it be on race, whether it be on economics, industrial relations, the list, but he's running a government that is highly anti-business. It just mounts up, and now the deceit of this. Disappointing.